welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror movies and awesomeness. This week, we have a look at the 1959 film Ghost of Dragstrip Hollow. This is episode 401, 401. We are beginning anew after celebrating number 400 2 weeks ago, and we're back with the Ghost of Dragstrip Hollow. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have seen it. So, warning, spoilers ahead. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, publisher at Castle Bridge Media, home of the Castle of Horror anthology. We had some snow this week. It was really wonderful to be in Denver. With me from Austin is Tony Savaggio, lead singer and bassist of the band Deserts of Mars, and lead guitarist of the band Rise from Fire. Say hello, Tony.
Howdy.
Howdy. Also in Austin, Mr. Drew Edwards is the writer-creator of the long-running underground comic Halloween Man, which you can find at Global Comics. He is a Best Writer Ringo nominee, Austin Chronicle Best of Austin Award winner, and a member of the PEN America Fellowship. Say hello, Drew.
Geronimo! Pow.
Such a great song. And finally, also in Denver, color commentary from Julia Guzman of Guzman Immigration of Denver. Say hello.
Hello. I used to think I was chicken, but now I'm sure.
Is that a reference to?
That's a line.
Is that a line from this? Wow,
Yes.
I'm so happy that
I love that. I love that line, and I want to remember it.
I'm so happy that you harvested lines from this movie. All right, so Ghost of Dragstrip Hollow is a 1959 AIP horror comedy. We're going to debate that. It was a sequel, supposedly, to their film Hot Rod Gang. It was made by the guys who would later bring you the Beach Party films. It was made by Samuel Arkoff and James H. Nicholson. And this is sort of them revving their engines and getting ready to go into the Beach Parties, which would start just 2.5 years later. It came out as a double feature with a film called Diary of a High School Bride, which I gotta see. So, and this one is one that, once again, I have foisted on the team because we get together and we go, hey, what are we going to watch? And we go back and forth, and then we go, hey, we're going to pick something real quick. And I go, Ghost of Dragstrip Hollow, and that's what we watched. And this introduction is probably longer than the actual film. So let's go. Opening thoughts. We'll get, let's do Julia, Tony, Drew, and then I'll go. Julia, we watched this last night. I know that it was a joy for you. Talk to me about your opening thoughts, The Ghost of Dragstrip Hollow.
Well, as was just mentioned, it's like, I think you mentioned that it's debatable as to whether this is even a film, given that it's barely an hour, and certainly not horror. But it has its moments. There's some, I actually laughed out loud a few times. I like that it is a very different look at the 50s than what we've had previously, even though it's the same universe. It's just a different kind of angle. And so for me, what I want to talk about as we get into this is the fact that this is 1959 and it's drag racing greaser teens who is theoretically what the people in Greece are supposed to be. So I really want to compare and contrast, like, what does 1959 think greasers look like versus 1978 think
That's an
1959
question.
greasers look like. So anyway, so that'll be interesting. But it was amusing. You can do anything for an hour, so if you didn't like it, it was only an hour, but I enjoyed it. I thought it was fun.
I thank you very much, and I can't wait to get to this question. And I don't think it's a settled question whether this is a horror movie. So let's continue that. Tony, what are your opening thoughts?
I like it. It's fun. There's a lot of those high school movies that show up most recently more often on riff tracks. They've done a lot of high school movies. So to me, it's all in that. I think it's interesting too that they really, we've done a few movies like Giant Gila Monster kind of humanized the drag kids.
Yeah, that's what I thought of too.
Yeah.
Giant Gila.
It's funny too because I'm not as down with. We've had a lot of drag racing kind of start to pick up in Austin, and I'm always, I don't know, I guess maybe I'm old enough that I'm like, what happens if, because some of it's right around, sounds like it's right around here from what I hear from my house in Round Rock. So I'm often thinking like, hey, there's a bunch of kids around here. Like, that's not great, especially kids walking home, because what else are you gonna do? during, hanging out in the suburbs. But I think it's interesting that it also humanizes them a lot. And it's really trying to, they put in a lot of lingo, and I'm always curious what kids would think about, like the kids who are going to a drive-in to see this movie. Are they going, yeah, that's us, I get it, thank you? Or are they going, oh man, that's like that's like 2
Nobody
years ago?
says that. Yeah,
Yeah, nobody
exactly.
says that. But the difference is that in 59, probably this lingo, we live in a world now where everything's instantaneous and everything goes away within a week or two. Or like, we don't even say that. That's like earlier this year. I don't even say that phrase anymore. So I wonder about that. But I really like, and I like that it's definitely a kind of, what they're trying for is well, they want to get more kids in the drive-in to, so it's very much like, hey kids, come see this. Hey drag, this is your generation, right? But it's also very much like the kids are all right kind of movie.
Yeah.
And
that's
I
a good
think
point.
that's always kind of neat and interesting when you're dealing with kind of counterculture.
That's
So
really good.
it's not nearly as funny as perhaps it thinks it is. There's not as much supernatural, but it's got as much supernatural as a Scooby-Doo.
It's kind of like the giant Gila monster meets Grease meets the Scooby-Doo game.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Drew, I think you made reference to, you thought you had kind of seen this. Is that right?
Oh no, I've actually seen this movie a lot.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, first of all, like I guess out of everybody on the podcast, I'm one that's tangentially, at the very least, somewhat attached to hot rodding culture because of being adjacent to the rockabilly scene. So a lot of the stuff that's featured in this movie still feels relatively familiar to me. But yeah, this is a movie that I've seen all the way through. I think this was like the third time of me actually sitting down and watching it. It's a movie, like, people will put this movie on at Halloween parties that I go to a lot as like background noise. So I guess there's its monster moviness street cred right there. If it's a movie that people will put on at a Halloween party, I think it at least got
yes, but there's also a costume party in it, so I'm gonna say that you can still get it in.
Yeah. But and here's the thing: if you do, before I go off on that, I want to say this before I forget about it. You mentioned Grease, Julia. This movie actually also, I think, definitely was an influence on Crybaby.
Oh yeah,
like big time. But this is one of those movies, I think, if like you're to judge it by the criteria of what makes a movie quote unquote good, you're not really going to come out ahead. It doesn't really get to the like quote unquote plot until the movie's more than halfway over. You also, like, they build up a rivalry between these two hot rod gangs, and you don't actually, like, the final confrontation actually takes place off screen.
Yeah,
like there's a lot of it's more like you're watching like a sketch comedy than sketch comedy show with like recurring characters than an actual movie. So it's not traditionally good, but it's also really entertaining, and it's again barely an hour long, so it's harmless enough fluff, and it's got some good lines in it. Like the line where the dad says, where are you looking, or what is it, what he comes outside and the two kids are making out, like, and he says, he's like, oh, we were just looking for such and such. He's like, well, where were you looking for her, in her tonsils or something like that? That's a good line. That's a good line. So there's some good stuff in this. And the ending is very, Hanna-Barbera Scooby-Doo, but I kind of like that about it. So I also come down on the side of liking this simply, because one, I like the aesthetic. Like, this is right in, a lot of my, aesthetical wheelhouse. Like, I love all the 50s clothes. I love the rat rods. I love the music. Like, there's a lot of stuff that I just really like about this movie. But again, if you're to judge it by the standards that we were to say, if you were going to give this movie stars based on competency, it wouldn't be considered a good movie. But that always also, that's going to bring us back to our oft debated what makes a movie good anyway. And I think this is another movie that begs that question.
Mhm.
That's a really good question. And it occurs to me, by the way, that if the final drag race had taken place on screen, this movie would be a feature-length movie. Like,
Oh yeah.
so it
Yeah,
leads me to
sure.
wonder, like, we'll get there, but like, what the hell? Like, was it money? Go ahead, Tony.
Possibly, because I mean they have the whole drag race at the beginning.
Yes.
What I also kind of dig though is the main drag rivalry is the
Two
women
women.
in the drags who are super competent and above. Actually, all the guys kind of defer to them in a lot of ways, other than the antagonist jerk boyfriend.
Yes.
You're
Well,
like, bitch,
let's
that
talk
guy,
about
because
this.
he's such a jackass. But in general, like I mean, it starts with their race, and all of that is really, I thought, was really cool. There's some other stuff I want to talk about the the parents and stuff like that later on. But yeah,
Oh
I
yeah.
thought that was kind of fascinating for the time, and just in general, that's really cool. And that doesn't even happen as much now. Maybe in, like, I don't know, the Fast and Furious movies.
Well, it's
But
interesting that yeah, this movie and we can use this also to dovetail into what we think of about the 50s. This movie is taking place contemporary times, 1959. There is a motor club that of teens who work on and soup up cars, and their driver, as far as I can tell, their only driver, who like actually does drag racing, which they're trying to taper off of so that they can keep some kind of city charter or whatever it is. So they're trying to get rid of the drag racing, but their drag racing driver is a woman, and there is not a single, well, if there are,
And the
it
person she
passes.
races is also a
And the
yeah,
person she races is a woman. In other words, in this, it's not that in this universe all the drag racers are women. It just so happens in this movie that all the drag, which is extreme, I think of as being pretty darn progressive.
which again, yeah, coming back to Greece, there is no suggestion that the pink ladies ever raced cars or that they would want
Right.
to, which is
right.
just really interesting to me.
No, that's absolutely right. There's not even that suggestion, to my knowledge, in the first Fast and the Furious of the modern era.
Sure.
So that's really wild. And in fact, we open up with this drag race between the actress Jodie Fair as Lois, who's part of our home team, and Elaine Dupont, who's Jodie Fair is a brunette, Elaine Dupont is a blonde. They race against one another. Rhonda, the blonde, she's part of a rival gang that we don't get to know very well, except for that they come around occasionally and threaten to rumble, basically. But this is how we're introduced to their world. They even race inside of. Does anybody know how to describe this for want of a better word, this storm drain ditch that they're
Again, I think
driving in?
it's the one from Greece. I think if
Yeah,
the way to describe it
That's
is
that's
the thing that they race around in Greece.
yeah.
Well, and it's also featured in them and a bunch of
And in Terminator,
other
right?
movies. Yeah, so like I think you're right. I mean, I'm no expert on the history of this movie, but it looks like that same plot of concrete that we've seen in quite a few other movies.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, it's so funny, and it's such a piece of the California landscape, and this is such a clearly California film, because as they're driving around, you see those palm trees, everywhere, lining the blocks. Um, Other than that, it's very much of a piece with the giant Gila monster, which I remember was one of Tony's favorite movies, and is a beloved MST3K film, which was also about a hot rod. I don't remember there being racing in that movie, but there was a lot of hot rodding, basically, a lot of like just working on cars and everything. Um,
My favorite line in the MST is when the Gila monster pokes his head into the place, and they had been singing, and the Lord said, whatever, and
yes,
he's like, said, "Die, children, die." Blah, blah, blah.
right.
It's just so funny. That's my
Yeah.
favorite, one of my favorite MSTs of all time.
But this question of gender roles in the 50s is really interesting to me, because just like with the lingo, um, which we can talk about separately in a sec. Just like with the lingo, it's impossible to tell if this is supposed to reflect reality or just be vaguely interesting or be radically different from reality. It's tough to figure that
Well,
out.
that's why I said, yeah, in my opening thoughts, that it's interesting to see what this movie thinks 1959 hot rodders or greasers are like versus what 1978 movie thinks 1959
Yeah.
greasers are like, because our movie has an idea of what greasers are like that is probably not actually remotely accurate.
Well, for
Just
one
like
thing,
West
they're
Side Story is
extraordinarily
not
clean
remotely
cut in this
accurate.
movie. I mean,
Exactly. They
in
don't even wear the
Grease,
leather jackets.
yeah, I mean, in Greece, the guys are all very busy looking for opportunities to, sexually assault women and trick them into sleeping with them and doing all that kind of stuff. And maybe that reflects reality, but maybe it doesn't. But at this 1959 movie, everybody's really pretty clean cut. Even
Yeah,
the
they're wholesome.
even the tough rival gang, when they crash the party and talk tough, nevertheless they come in wearing sport coats and ties, which I
Super
find
nice
hilarious.
clothes, and they cut a rug. Yeah, exactly. They're not
I
like, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was curious about that as well, because I wondered. I was kind of thinking about this as I was formulating stuff, and I haven't really done as much research. Like, I would be curious if hot rod kids from this era, if that's who they're truly. I mean, I'd have to look up like how much even hot rod kids would be like. Is it still happening in the same way? Like, is this later? But did they think that this gang? Do they think that this gang with its rules is cool? Are they more like the other gang who are like, we don't. This is ridiculous. Like, we don't go by rules. We're hot rodders. Like, we'll hot rod where
Mhm.
we'll drag race wherever we want. Like, what are you even doing? So this gang has decided to sort of play it by the rules. And so I would be curious if the kids in the drive-in are like, these kids are squares, straight
Right.
up.
Sure.
Like,
Well, I mean, I
Absolutely.
think my theory, as we've talked about a lot of films made in the 50s and 60s, is that it's a big country, right? So most of the people watching the movie in the drive-in are just regular middle class kids who probably don't even
sure.
have the money to put together cars. So it's all pretty theoretical and sort of aspirational in a
Sure.
sense, and most kids
Well, I
most kids aren't
think
the popular kids, and most kids aren't greasers either. Go ahead, Drew.
Right.
I think these kids in this movie are middle class kids. Like if you look at the way they're
Yeah.
living and
Yeah, I would go with
everything.
that.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, do you have to have a lot of money to be a hot rodder? I mean, I think there's a yes and no thing about that. I think
Sure.
there's the number one thing you
Yeah, you
have
got to
to
be able to buy
have.
the car.
Well, but the first and foremost, because a lot of the times what people involved with this subculture, and this is still true today, is that they don't buy a car that's top of the line. They buy a car that's a junker and they fix
Yep.
it up.
Sure. Like they do in
And
Greece.
yeah, but the first thing that you have to do to be involved with car culture is you have to have the mechanical know-how, which is something they're really playing up with this girl whose dad wishes that she would do more traditionally
Yes.
feminine things, and that she's
Yeah.
and I think it's great that she's like walking around with like oil on her.
Yeah, she's all
Yes.
smudged up when she comes home. And
Oh, that
yeah,
one,
Yeah.
no, but see, that was so stupid because her clothes were pristine, and then for whatever reason, she never washes her face, and the whole rest of the movie, she's got the same oil spots. And I'm like, do you not know how to get those out? Is that what's happening right now? By the way, I'm looking at the Hot Rod magazines of 1959 and the covers, and they really do look. The people in these magazines really do look exactly like the guys from the movie. So I think they're wearing button-up collared shirts, khakis or jeans, but not. They look kind of the same. So I think maybe that was pretty close to accurate.
I would love to go deeper and read a whole thing on like the white
Well,
t-shirt, the white undershirt and leather
you're
jacket look
talking
of
about
Grease.
like the sort of Fonzarelli
Right.
stereotype look,
Or
and
James Dean. James Dean.
That's
yeah,
true.
but a lot of that, strangely enough, I mean, I'm not going to say that it's all from this, but a lot of the sort of iconicness of that, I'm forgetting the artist's name, and it's going to come to me late at night. But there was a gay beefcake artist that he's the one that was very involved with popularizing that sort of stereotypical look of like the tight white t-shirt, motorcycle jacket, that
like
kind
Tom
of
of
thing.
Finland kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's where a lot of what popularized that is like and again, I'm not saying that was only that guy, but like it definitely was, a part of it. And I think then you later on had stuff like Happy Days and Grease, and also sort of when punk rock came in and kind of quasi adopted
Sex Pistols,
like greaser type, especially the Clash,
Right.
like that sort of greaser look. I think that sort of codified it, whereas in reality, not everybody looked like that.
Well, of course not.
Then.
I would be curious also if the magazines from the time. I mean, again, I'd have to do a lot more research. There's a lot more research that could be done, but I would be curious if the magazines of the time were also not going to make photo shoots of the T-Birds. Right?
It's a good and as Drew points out, the people in this movie are middle class folks living in California.
Yeah, they're not like you look
class.
at something like The Wild One with Brando and those guys are legitimately like, those are thugs, but they look more like what you think of as a stereotypical greaser.
Well, in keeping with my grand unified theory that all of this is an attempt to communicate with middle class kids and get their money.
Of course.
If you go just 3 years later to Beach Party, the greasers, so-called, wearing the black hats and everybody dressed like Brando. Everybody dressed like Brando. They're the bad guys. They are and they're not even dangerous bad guys. They're idiots. So that's the hilarious thing is by 1963, that whole thing where it was like, if you want to be one of the cool kids, you laugh at those guys who were led by 45-year-old Harvey Lembeck, looking like an idiot on his motorcycle with his black jacket,
Von Zipper,
which
yes,
yeah, exactly. Which eventually leads to the plus and minus. You have metalheads like in Trick or Treat, and you have metalheads who are also treated as just like, oh, those idiots.
Yeah,
which was for me like a back and forth.
I think that's also partly why they would make fun of those people, is because there's a lot of the times these movies were written by older people and they might be disdainful of like the rock and roll culture, which is kind of still in its infancy when these movies are coming out. Like 1950s and certainly 1960s, like rock and roll is still a fairly new thing. It's not even 20 years old. So like,
let's talk about the rock and roll thing. I do want to get to lingo as well, but yeah, go ahead, Tony. What were you gonna say?
Well, that is that is fascinating. Again, what's cool about this is, maybe it's written by older people, but I still like the through line in this movie that the interviewer, the guy who's doing the report, kind of comes in and goes, "Wow, I didn't know this was, the kid." Again, the kids are all right. Like, I didn't know that I'd meet these. I was expecting these, danger loving, thrill seeker kids. Instead, I got like a decently wholesome, other than some of the rivalry and the stuff that's going on, I've got this decent thing and I need to report on this because it's different.
Yes.
And I think that taking their side on things,
Yeah,
which is probably the way you do that to get more kids, like, you don't want it to be, you can do a movie where the kids are terrible, but if you want to get, cars in the drive-in and butts and seats, maybe that's not the way you do it. You do it more like this.
You always want to flatter your audience. And I'm not saying that in like a mean way, but I mean, you want to, a nicer way to say it was, you always want to try to find the good in the audience so they can look at it and feel like they're being embraced by the film.
Right.
Instead of, but yeah, this is kind of a neat plot, by the way. If you could rejigger this film to follow a modern, like, structure as opposed to the structure it has, which is more like a Robert, like a Carol Burnett special or something, but
barely a structure.
Yeah, but if it had a structure, the plot is these guys have a gang and a journalist played by Russ Bender has come in to write an article about hot rod gangs. That's a good plot. I mean, that's not bad, and he sticks around.
Well, and
Well,
the
it's also
the
sorry.
subplot is that they're losing their headquarters,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
which
But
is what
when we-
eventually leads us to the haunted house.
Yeah.
Yes.
When we started watching the movie, Jason goes, "So I'm hoping that maybe this time I'll be able to figure out what the plot is." And I'm like, "Well, that doesn't bode well for
Yeah,
this film."
thanks. But it's you talk about it though, it's still following the basic plot of like a Mickey Rooney
Yeah.
movie. Like, hey, we got to get the gang together and raise the money.
It just so
Like-
happens, though, that it's so poorly structured, or maybe you could say lazily structured. I don't think they care. But that plot that you're exactly right. That is the plot of the film, but the movie sort of meanders and takes about half an hour to get to that.
Well, yeah, because it's got the skits and the,
Oh
all of
my
the stuff.
gosh.
It's got multiple
Well,
kind of sketch comedy
thankfully,
skits.
Yeah.
and musical numbers and what
Yeah,
have you.
yeah.
Yes.
Thankfully, the kids are okay to hang around with. Like,
Yes.
if
Yeah,
the
yeah.
characters were, not charming, I think that this movie would be a lot more painful to watch.
This movie is held aloft by a memorable female cast because Jodie Fair is really good as this she's not a tomboy, right? She's not like presented as a 50s style tomboy dressed always in blue jeans. She's a
they're
feminine,
sexy. They're all sexy.
she's a sexy feminine girl who's interested mainly in fixing cars and racing cars. In other words, she's like a complicated, very, very contemporary person.
She's Cha-Cha Di Gregorio, except that if she Cha-Cha was a racer. Not really.
Yes.
But I mean, it's just I kept thinking about that.
Again,
Like,
though-
why it'd be nice if Cha-Cha was a racer.
Go ahead, Drew.
I do know lots of women that again, because of the circles I run in, I do know lots of women that, one minute they're, pencil skirt, high heels, glamour girl, and but they're also into hot rod cars, and they can tell you everything about how a car works.
Well,
So,
heck yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, sure.
Again, I can't tell you how this was back in the day, but I can tell you that this rings true to me
Yes.
now.
Sure.
Well, what I'm
I
saying,
do,
what I'm excited about is that is not something that we get to experience in the movies a lot, and that's pretty neat.
Yeah.
Likewise, the main engineer girl in this, who is easily as talented as the main engineer guy, is apparently, as far as I can work out, 6 foot tall Sunita Pelkey, who is disguised.
As far as you can work out that she's 6 foot tall, not that she's Sunita
As
Pelkey.
far as I can work out, she's about 6
Yes.
feet tall because she is easily the tallest person in this
Yeah.
entire movie. She is taller than all the boys. She's taller than all the girls. She is statuesque, and then they hide her behind some giant glasses. But other than that,
And she has a
she's-
short boyfriend who looks up to her all the time.
yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
she's definitely one step away from the usual take off your glasses reveal of her.
Right.
But none of it's hiding the fact that she is beautiful. Like,
She's-
that she's
I mean,
statuesque. And I will have to admit, like, if of all the types in all of these movies, if I have a type, Sunita Pelkey is definitely in this movie. Is definitely like,
Mhm.
yeah.
No, she's.
Well,
to-
And they also
what's
give
not
her.
to
They also
like?
give her the most revealing costume in the costume party too.
oh,
Like
yeah,
everybody
no,
else
it's
is in
bizarre.
these like gowns and stuff, and they're like, okay, well, since you stand out, you're gonna be in the skin tight sort of creature, like skin tight
Right.
spandex suit. There you
You're
go.
gonna be a scaly unitard. Yes.
Yeah.
No
one else
She looks
is
like
remotely that in the rest of the.
she looks like Julie Newmar with glasses, and there's also not a planet on Earth. She looks nothing like a teenager. There is nothing remotely 15, 16, 17 about this woman who is hanging out and fixing cars. Anyway,
Right.
Well, it's
Selena,
funny
if
you
you're
say that
looking-
because I was going to say she reminds me of Josie from Josie and the Pussycats of the comics.
I don't
but she
remember.
also
Was
doesn't-
was Josie
She
like
also doesn't. Well, she also doesn't seem very 15, 16.
right? Anyway, the movie's playing on the screen on my wall right now, actually, and it's the evil gang is coming in their sport coats and ties and talking tough. It's really hilarious. I like that the mean girl also wearing a nice little party dress. They also, by the way, now the scene that's playing is the slumber party where by the way, once again, the
Oh yeah,
Ghost
Jason wanted
of
me to talk
Dragstrip
about slumber
Hollow.
parties.
So this film is The Ghost of Dragstrip Hollow. The movie is like 20 minutes in, and now the ladies are having a slumber party. I don't know, Joy. Is it a realistic
with
slumber
the
party?
spinster, well, before that also they have the gag of the spinster woman with parrots, and evidently parrots were just the rage in
Oh, really?
like. Well, I mean, let's think about how many movies had parrots or had
Mm.
even, especially horror movies too, because they would have the parrots like cackle or stuff. Like how many sketches, like Abbott and Costello style sketches or Three Stooges, where it was the parrot.
Yes.
Eventually I guess that gave way to chimpanzees, but for a long time the parrot was this foil for also haha, it says funny things that the cast
Oh
can't
my
get away
God.
with.
Yes.
And
I
Well,
just
it says things that are not. I mean, okay, this is gonna sound ridiculous, and I apologize in advance, but that is not a realistic parrot.
no, none of these
It
are.
doesn't, because it's not repeating. No, but I mean, a lot of times the parrot gags will just be something that the parrot repeats that it hears all the time, which makes
Right.
sense. So it'll be like the people like you idiot or whatever. But this parrot literally has like conversation, like it's a
Yeah.
comedian parrot, and I actually want to know who the comedian
Well,
is who's doing the
well,
parrot.
I hope it's
Like
the
who's
same
writing the lines.
like the same person or set of people because they got a lot of work in this era. Although this woman my mom knew had a parrot that learned it would start to do a bunch of stuff. She had a lot of animals. She had like a whole, a
Menagerie.
small farm, menagerie, and so the parrot would do things and make all the animals start freaking out,
Ooh.
and then it would go, "Shut up!" in her voice. And then when it heard them, they calmed
fantastic.
down. The parrot would go.
That
It
is
knew
really
exactly what it was
fantastic.
doing. Like
that is
because
really
they can't
I love
weird.
listen.
that.
Oh my gosh.
But it loved to just cause a ruckus and then like tell them to shut up and then laugh because it had done that. Because they can reason. That's the
That's
whole
kind of
thing about a
awesome.
parrot. Yeah. So but during this era, I just started remembering like when they brought the parrot in, and it's a whole thing like, oh, well, this spinster woman's gonna be uptight. She's gonna be a square. And she ends up, leading to the whole all. Actually, she's
Driving.
the reason that we have the supernatural stuff eventually.
Yeah, it's her house.
But her whole thing is, oh no, who's this gonna? But she's like, yeah, let them have the slumber party. Oh, I'm also cool. Which I guess
Well,
she's
then
like
she's the one who
she's like the
drives
original rapping
drives the
granny.
car like a crazy
Yeah,
person.
that's
Yeah,
exactly right.
she's
Very
the
good.
original rapping granny.
Yes,
Like, well,
that's really
grandma's
good.
hip as well.
Yeah, you're right, and that's a lot of her comedy. In fact, is
Yeah.
this idea of like how hip this and this fast driving grandma is, and they've got her dressed up like Whistler's mother. This weird
Yeah.
sort of like just ancient outfit that she's wearing that appears to I can't even
It
place this
looks
outfit that
like
she's wearing.
somebody that's like Edwardian or Victorian.
Thank you.
Right.
Yes,
Right.
I couldn't at all place it. Was just bizarre. In 1959, it's totally bizarre. Uh, I do want to mention that the party that they have, see, they have a party and then it's a slumber party after that. The party that they have, which is a boy girl party, has, they occasionally turn out the lights. Turning out the lights at the party is so that the kids can make out. The adults who are hanging out, including this journalist and the dad who are chaperoning, they joke about how that's a universal thing. I want to mention this is 1959. Peyton Place came out in 1957. It also had exactly the same scene. But Peyton Place is a lot more like overheated and judgy about the
Yeah.
kissing parties, and this movie not so much. It's actually pretty easygoing.
I like that actually a lot. And again, could be just to play to the crowd. But
Yes.
what I thought was interesting, this movie does a lot of interesting things that you don't see in a lot of other movies. They tend to be more judgy. They tend to be kind of looking from the more adult perspective.
Yes.
And in this, there's a lot of back and forth, especially between the parents.
Yeah.
That's basically like, look, nothing changes. Boys and girls do all this stuff all the time. We did it when we were younger. Like all of that stuff is, I'm not a parent.
Well,
So,
there's a line missing from this movie because the mom is like, "Oh, leave him alone. Who cares?" And the dad is like, he's kissing her in the car. I'm very worked up about this. And she goes, "We did, remember when we were young, we did stuff too." And the line that should come next, which comes in every other movie and TV show I've ever seen, is, yes, that's why I'm worried.
Right,
Because I
right,
know
right, right. Of
exactly
course,
how
of
this
course,
goes.
of
Sure.
course, of course.
But he didn't even say that.
There's
He's just like,
also an Eve of Destruction speech where, by the way, the movie's an hour long, and somehow all this crap is getting shoved into this thing, which is, I guess, why it's taking so long for them to get to the plot. But they've got this whole thing about these kids are like driving fast and making out and stuff because it's the Eve of Destruction. You've got, they could get blown up any day. That wasn't the case for us. Everything moves faster now. Well,
Yeah.
what a cool that's a cool talk. I kind of didn't necessarily expect that level of commentary to come in here.
No, all of that. I kind of want to get back to Drew. Drew was going to talk about rock and roll.
Oh yeah,
But
please.
before that, I do it. The other part of what you were talking about, Drew, about and everybody talking about rock and roll kind of coming into itself. I just remembered in the documentary about Lemmy, he actually talks about, I lived in a time when growing up when there wasn't rock and roll.
Mm.
And he talks about, this is coming from the guy who founded Motorhead.
Yeah.
And he's like, and it's just him going, there was a time, people forget, there was a time when there was not rock and roll. And so when these big rock gods came along, these rock and roll guys, especially, Little Richard, I think he talks about, and he's like, it was unreal. Like, where is this coming from?
Yeah.
And he talked about the Beatles and how they were the real deal because they were from the streets, that kind of stuff. And he was in, like a kind of rock and roll skiffle type band back in, touring in a van for a while. But I just thought that was a fascinating revelation when he's talking about it. It's like, there's, when I was growing up, there wasn't rock and roll. It wasn't until
Right.
later.
It suddenly
And
occurs, right?
we forget about that.
Well, I think we as contemporary people tend to look a lot of the times at rock music from this time period is kind of quaint, and yet I still remember an interaction I had when I still had a day job with somebody that was fairly possibly a teenager, but at the very least early 20s. And I'm the sort of person, I listen to music a lot, and I had little Richard playing on through my Spotify account on my phone.
Mm-hmm.
And this kid thought I was listening to something that was to something that sounded like, to their ears, very weird and very edgy. That there's this person kind of vocalizing the way Little Richard does.
Yeah.
And I to this person, this young person, I might as well have been listening to like hardcore punk or something.
Huh.
And I think that's an important important lesson to take back from this is that no matter how something might seem to you at the moment as a contemporary person, if you take away a certain amount of context, it kind of puts you back into the context of the people who are experiencing it at the time.
Oh, that's
and
interesting. For the first time, right? Yeah.
I think that the music that's in this movie it's pretty fluffy, if you compare it to more of the black or hillbilly music of its time period. But at the same time, these kids are kind of raucous, like they're firing guns while they're playing, it's fun rowdy. It's a contained kind of rowdy, but it's still rowdy. And I think that by having, but they're trying to differentiate these kids from the quote unquote bad kids.
Yeah.
It's sort of like they were allowing them to have their cake and eat it too. Like you can have this rock and roll where the girls sing and everybody's having this rowdy dance party, but they're never going to take it too far because they have a coat of arms. And that might make, if somehow a parent saw this movie, it might make them okay with it. But at the same time, Jason, you're talking about flattering your audience. This movie doesn't ever seem like it's talking down to the teenage characters in it, if that makes sense.
No, I agree with you. I agree. it seems to that's why we get this girl who is more like a real person than you normally find. She's kind of well-rounded, and Lois, that's neat. By the way, her boyfriend leaves no impression on me whatsoever. I know he's there. I don't remember what his name is. He left nothing on me, and I admittedly I'm a cishet dude, so maybe I'm more inclined to pay attention to Lois. But I'm just saying that somehow she is so darn memorable, and her boyfriend left no impression whatsoever.
Well, but she's actually the main character of the movie. Like the movie mostly follows her. Like
Yeah.
it alternates. Like he's really only in scenes with like the rest of the gang. Like
Right.
you
Her
only
father
ever
gets
see
more
home
time.
life.
Yeah, her relationship with her dad gets way more time and sort of attention, in a sense, emotional attention, than her relationship with the boyfriend. And that was really cool. By the way, the lingo, one of my favorite lines that people point out is he's got static in his attic, completely zonk. I have no idea if they're making up shit, like in what's the one where the two teenagers become serial killers? I'm sorry, with Winona Ryder and Christian Slater.
Oh, Heather's.
Heather's, yes. In Heather's, they just made up a lot of lingo because that way it wouldn't become dated. Everything that they said was all new.
Yeah.
I have no idea what's going on in this movie. I have no idea if any of this is real or like impossible. What I do know is oh, go ahead, Julia. Were you gonna?
No, go ahead.
On SCTV, Joe Flaherty used to play a character called Count Floyd, and the gag was that he had the sort of Phantom of the Opera kind of, Elvira sort of show where he would play a horror movie and then break in during breaks and comment on the horror movie. But the gag was that they never gave him good horror movies, and so it would be really boring, and he'd have to break in and apologize that nothing scary was happening. And I thought, this is a Count Floyd movie, because it's I think Drew counted, and it's like 26
That's
minutes
perfect.
in. I
No,
know.
it's 40 minutes. 40 minutes in.
36 minutes.
36,
Yeah.
nearly 40, when they finally go, we need a new clubhouse, and grandma, as Tony points out, the rapping grandma says, well, actually, I own a spooky old place, let's try
It's
that.
haunted.
It's haunted, but let's go stay overnight and see how things go. So that's the
So
next
somebody
plot.
goes, if we can despirit it. Who is the older guy? He's a journalist, right? The one who's
Yes.
hanging out with them.
Yeah.
That's
He's
right.
like, if we can despirit it, can we? That was really funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, that
And
was
so the
kind
next
of hilarious.
set piece is the overnight, where they stay overnight, and spooky stuff happens in this haunted house.
Okay. But did you want to go back and have me talk about slumber parties or no?
Oh yeah, no.
Yes,
Tell me,
definitely.
is this what
Okay.
do the girls wear, like nighties and chase one another around the house like this?
Okay, I sigh. So first of all,
Lord.
obviously, I have not been to all the slumber parties that have ever existed, so I don't know what they all look like. But I have been to quite a few, or I went to quite a few when I was a kid, and my kids had a couple. So what I do know is that the most realistic part of the slumber party, as reflected in this film, is that they watch a movie for a few minutes, because
Yes.
that definitely happens. What we experienced when I was a kid was you're always trying to scare each other. So there's a lot of like that Bloody Mary stuff, and light as a feather, stiff as a board, like you're trying to doing all this stuff, like all this kind of, Ouija board stuff. That's something that we do a lot. You wear whatever you're going to wear. I mean, you might wear a nightie if that's what you wear, because you just want to be comfortable. So that's not the nightie part is not the weird part. And thank God they didn't have a pillow fight. I've never been at a summer party with a pillow fight. I told Jason that one time I had a summer party in my my house, and we were upstairs in the upstairs living room, and we hear this like sound on the stairs, and it's like don't just really loud, and we're like, what the hell? And then we look around, and somebody walks into the living room with a terrifying monster mask and like a hat and a trench coat, and the monster mask was lit up from within, and it was my dad who had like taken his arm out of the trench coat, or out of the overcoat that he had, and was holding a flashlight, and I don't know where he got this mask. I think he got it literally just for the purpose of scaring the crap out of us. But it was so scary. We just all screamed top of our lungs. Oh my God. But that's the kind of thing that you know have going on. But of course, people stay up late and talk and play different kind of pranks with each other on each other. They play games, whatever, listen to music. But yes, so I just thought that was worth noting
That's
that
I thank you so
no,
much for
don't
sharing. That was
have
great.
pillow fights.
I thought it was fascinating too that you would do it more in a contemporary setting. There would be more of a dance and probably more of a movie theater or like a grander TV thing. But they turned the slumber party into kind of its own rock and roll music video
Yeah.
because they start with like a Western and then they kind of turn that on its ear because that a Western on TV is like their traditional, oh, my parents would watch this Western.
Yeah.
And then it starts turning like to the side and doing all those video tricks that
Yeah. I didn't
that a
understand
TV
any
doesn't.
of that.
No, but it's the equivalent of all of a sudden in a contemporary, like in an 80s movie, everything would turn probably into like a Madonna video or something bigger, like with more lights and more of a music, like everything would become a music video. And I thought that was really interesting that this is the unrealistic ideal of what a rock and roll slumber party is, and it's turning that kind of adult stuff on its ear with the way the TV works. And that's what you have at the time, which I thought was great.
Wow, thank you. Go ahead, Drew.
The music video thing I think is an apt comparison because like before we had MTV, you had movies like this, you had stuff like The Girl Can't Help It and things like that where they would take like a lot of the times rock music of the day and they would give it these visuals behind it, which again, rock music was fairly new, but it's always been something that has had an aesthetic appeal to it. If you, especially if you compare it to music that came before, and I think that's a reason why you had this strong desire to put visuals to it. And these movies like this can kind of be seen as an early music video.
Yeah. Well, I just like this scene because it's doing that. It's taken like a really the influence again. This is why I go, hey, if you watch back enough, nothing's new under the sun, right?
Yeah.
Any movie where they start and break into a song, dance, and it becomes kind of more surreal. And you often see it, like you'll see a lot of teen movies where it becomes a rock video or it becomes like a pop video or whatever. And this is taking that adult, like it's a Western, and she goes, look what's happening. And then it starts to go, goes backwards. It does all this stuff that isn't remotely possible on TV set.
Yeah.
And adds, but they're playing, music behind it, and then they it goes back and forth between that and the the sound that's coming from the TV. All of that, that's a cool, and how cool is that as a teenager? I could imagine being like, yeah, what if your TV did do that? What if this, this is this surreal kind of thing that happens? I thought that was really interesting. They pack a lot into an hour and 5 minutes.
Yes.
Yeah, they
I mean, thank you for contextualizing that for me because that gives me an all new way of understanding that scene, and that actually is really, really great.
Yeah, we see it constantly in TV and movies, especially teen movies, I would say. And this is I just thought it was interesting. This is kind of precursor to what we saw perhaps growing up, and then extends. We never have gotten tired of a different version of this gag.
Yes. No, you're right. You're exactly right. So when they get to the haunted mansion and they all camp out there and they're sleeping on couches, and it's a little tittillating because the girls are sleeping near the guys and blah blah blah. So it's kind of sexually chaste, but also titillating, and that's what's exciting about it for your audience. But the gags it's really cool because it's all this Ghost and Mr. Chicken kind of stuff. Like there's literally the spinning this spinning fireplace that is almost exactly like the one in Young Frankenstein. And I'm sure this gag is in a lot of movies, but it's really neat here because just like with Young Frankenstein, only one person at a time is aware that the fireplace spins around, which is really great. And there's other gags. There's floating candles and
This
stuff like that.
this part of this movie
Mm-hmm.
had to be an influence on Scooby-Doo. Like it had
Yeah,
to
that's what
be.
I was saying. Yeah.
But there's no.
Yeah,
I would be
the
surprised
whole
if
the
it
whole
wasn't.
haunted house thing, because you've got the monster, the guy dressed up in the monster costume, who by the way created that costume as well, the guy wearing it. He's dressed up in the thing, and he's going like basically trying to get rid of these people because he's just hanging out at this house, and so it's fully you expect him to go, and I would have gotten away with it too if it weren't for these meddling kids. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
it's like
Well, and he does
100%.
stuff like hanging out with them or sleeping next to one of them,
Yeah,
and just
dancing with
Scooby-Doo
them.
kind of
Yeah.
crap.
And
Yes.
I
Exactly.
had
No, it's
watched. I
100%
had
Scooby-Doo.
I had watched the She Creature not too long ago, and I was trying to place it, and I had to actually look it up again. Like, oh, where have I seen that? And they also have the
Yeah, it's
Invasion of the
She Creature.
Saucer Men
Yes.
mask in there too,
Mhm,
which
mhm.
countless rubber erasers and gumball toys were made from the Saucer Men.
Oh, this is
like
stuff
growing
that I
up,
saw.
that was
When
just
we were growing up, you saw that mask, the masks that you saw all the time, or that I saw all the time anyway. This She Creature thing showed up in Cracked and Crazy all the time,
yeah.
and the alien that you just mentioned,
Yeah, the Saucer Man,
um,
because a huge head with
Saucerman,
bulging
yeah.
eyes. But there were so many erasers and just like bootleg, like that thing made the rounds as far as bootlegs and what when you had something that said what's shorthand for alien tchotchke, it was definitely Saucerman was up there.
Yeah.
Well, I also think this is AIP like reutilizing what they
Sure.
had on them because this is a low budget flick.
Oh, for sure. Which is so great. I mean, what I love about low budget movies, no matter what, is how much stuff accidentally makes it onto the frame because it's just there. So you get to see people wearing their own clothes, and you get to see props that are left over from other movies, and they're a wonderful document of just what happened to be available, which I love so much. It's why I love these movies more than high budget films typically. And yeah, that's something I realize more and more.
Well, I
Uh,
think you learn different things about a time period. If you're gonna look at this is more as a artifact of its time period than an actual film. There's a lot you can take away from this, whether it's 100% an accurate document of things that were going on. That could be called into
Right.
question. And again, I'm not enough of a historian to get into too much of that. Like I have an enthusiasm for a lot of the stuff that's going on here, but I'm not going to pretend to know more than I do. But I think, there's something to be said to watching this than versus, like I guess Creature from the Black Lagoon would be a higher budget movie that would
Yeah.
be playing around the same time period at drive-ins and whatnot. And I think there's you take away different things from that.
Yeah,
And
that's well said,
obviously
because it's
also
not
that's
like
a
I
much
don't love.
better movie
I love
than
those
this.
too. I love Jaws. It's not like I don't like high budget movies. It's a really excellent point. But it can be cool to look at a low budget film because you get to see a decent document about what's just hanging out
Well,
around the film.
I also think as enthusiasts of, horror cinema or genre cinema or whatever the hell you want to call it, it is interesting to see a company like AIP who made a ton of low budget films. And it's funny, we've done far less American international stuff than we have, Hammer or Toho or
That's true.
Universal.
Man,
like
is
we
that
really,
true?
at some
Yeah.
point we really should just dive into some AIP stuff. But
I am all
it is
for it. If
interesting
you
to
want
see.
to, yeah. No problem. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, that's a discussion for
Yeah.
after the episode. But
Sure.
my point being is that we've seen enough of these movies to where we can see the props that they're reusing. There's something really charming about
agree.
that.
Yeah.
Because they're just doing it to save money, but at the same time, I like seeing the sea creature. I like seeing that giant Martian head. Like, I like that stuff. It's so fun.
Yeah, I agree completely.
Yeah.
And it would be good for me to watch a lot of this stuff because, again, like Tony, we were talking about. We talk about Mad Magazine all the time, and I mean, there's a lot of these things that just showed up in those magazines that I still don't really have a lot of context for. Like, what the
Yeah.
hell is that? And then it'll show up, and you go, "Oh, that's the creature from the head that wouldn't die." I didn't get it, and now
Yeah,
I
I think
do.
Cracked had even more of that.
Yes.
Contextually, like Mad had some of it. Cracked really like a lot. They would have a lot of the kind of captioned, and a lot of
Yes.
it came from horror because I think it just lends itself to you could do more with crazy captions than that.
So to get back to the movie, they have this haunted night where the creature is knocking around and scaring them, and then they decide, okay, for reasons that I've completely
So
forgotten. Go ahead, Drew.
one other thing about the night, something else that I was thinking about while watching this is I wonder if like the room kind of going berserk and everything. Like, I never have thought about this until just this time watching it because I just recently rewatched Evil Dead 2. But I really wonder if this is something that Sam Raimi was thinking about with some of the stuff he did with the cabin in Evil Dead 2.
I wonder.
I mean, that would not
I
surprise me at all, right?
I think there's something to that, although he was probably maybe. I mean, Raimi digs deep, so it's entirely possible. I think he was certainly thinking about the goofiness of like Hanna-Barbera and Scooby-Doo for sure.
Well,
But
I
this
think
is in the
it'd be
DNA.
closer to when things float around in a Stooges comedy because he was hugely influenced by Stooges.
Oh, good point. Yeah.
So it was not. I doubt it was Scooby Doo, and I can
Yeah,
almost
that's a really
guarantee
good
you
point.
it was any scary.
But I could see him
or-
watching this.
Absolutely.
Like, this
Yes.
is something I could see him digging.
You want to know something funny? So you're absolutely right. I was just thinking about the fact that by the time we get to, you know what? I'll save it because when they get to the party, there's a new element that is super strange, and I can't believe they're fitting it into this film. But so also during this night, so like I said, the kids are sleeping on couches next to one another. The creature is wandering around. When they survive the night, they decide we're going to have a dance and raise money to make this place into our clubhouse. And so that they off screen they go. This is why the movie is so short. Is a lot of the filler stuff just doesn't even happen on the screen. Off screen, they run around and make invitations and invite people and set up the costume party, and then the costume party
Yeah, and
happens.
off screen, the main character has a whole other
Drag race.
race.
Yeah, that happens in the
Yes.
middle of the party, though.
Yeah. That
Like
happens
there's
right at the
there's a
end.
whole part of the party where she's
Yeah.
gone and comes back after a drag because they challenge
says-
each other at the party.
It's
Yeah.
got to be a budget thing. It has to be. It has to be just that.
Yeah.
Look, we don't have the money to do another drag race,
Right.
and so we're just going to have a scene where they say, "Well, we had a drag race, and I regret it, and I'll be your girl, and you can drive me around because I'm going to be grounded." And that's just hilarious and strange. Anyway, at this set piece, which is the party, the funny thing is, this is the piece where it's a horror comedy because you had the haunted night, which was not so bad, and now the big party with rock and roll and everybody's dancing, and you have like really cool dancing going on, by the way. And Sunita Pelkey is poured into her costume so that she can be there with her boyfriend, who rolls out, I am not joking, an artificially intelligent car that
Did anybody else?
Yeah, that it is as intelligent as the parrot. So they have a total
Yes.
like snipe off.
Yes.
Exactly.
Speaking of her and her boyfriend,
Yes.
did anybody, like, the other thing I kept thinking about with the two of them because of the size discrepancy is
Yes.
Big Barda and Mr. Miracle.
Oh, I
yeah,
didn't think about that.
I was thinking about 16 Candles and Long Duck's Dong.
Yes. That very tall girl that
Yeah.
Lord.
Long Duck Dong winds up with. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yes.
Also, she's equally supportive of like, hey, you need to rest, and also like has the perfect kind of like duality of also being pretty much his dominant of him.
Yes.
Like, you need to get your rest, but you really need to get your rest. And like it's a strange, more adult than this movie relationship in a lot of ways.
It is. I once again, she doesn't fit here, but I'm so thankful that she's here. I mean,
Right.
I'm just, it's anybody else you accidentally put into this role, you would be missing out on part of the charm of the film.
Yeah.
The guy is a nerd that you could catch in almost any kind of movie. I mean,
Exactly.
he's, but she's something special. So yeah, Drew, I'm gonna leave it to you because I just feel like giving it to somebody else to try to make sense of this. What is the deal with the monster when they finally when they finally unmask him?
Well, I think that this doesn't play quite well to people who aren't makeup effects enthusiasts, I guess, but that is Paul Blaisdell, who was AIP's makeup man. So it's a bit of an inside joke, and that's why he has like the sort of whining, pretty like, oh, they didn't use me in Horror of the Black Museum. And I don't even know in 1959 if that is a
Right.
joke that would play well to
Yeah.
a large amount of people. But that's what's going on, if you really must know.
That is so crazy.
Yeah.
The actual characters, once he wanders off after doing his speech, they unmask him. He goes, "I'm a makeup artist who's mad that I've been written out of the movies," and he leaves. The characters look at one another and literally shrug and go back to dancing, and that's the end
But
of the
there,
movie.
it doesn't.
I think
to your point, though, what you're saying is, why is he haunting this house as the makeup artist in joke, right? Like,
Yeah.
I guess so.
because
Yeah.
he's got all the tape.
there's
he's got like a
nothing
tape player.
in movie that makes sense.
Yeah, it would have been
There's
easy to
nothing
just
in the
add a
movie that makes
line
sense
of
of it.
like, "Oh, I was enjoying just squatting here because I didn't have a house, and now you guys
And I
showed
had to
up."
scare you people off so I could keep it. And then maybe they could give him
Maybe
a
they
job.
could have gone like, oh, they did AIP didn't hire me for Horrors of the Black Museum, so I had to start squatting in this spooky old mansion, and when you showed up, I decided to use my props to scare. See, I just fixed the movie right there.
Yes.
That could have been a line of dialogue, and it really would have made it a Scooby-Doo ending, but oh well.
Yes. No, you're exactly right. It's so strange and so unimportant. It clearly the filmmakers don't think this is remotely important. You don't care why the
Right.
spooky stuff was happening. Nobody cares, and
It was just something exploitive that they could sell the movie on. Like
Right.
they wanted
Yes.
to be able to put a ghost on the poster,
Yes.
and
Technically, there also is a ghost.
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh,
there's
yeah,
a ghost for like 5 seconds at the end of the movie.
He goes, oh, you're.
Well, I
He's a
mean,
ghost.
and this ghost has been around a lot because again, there's all this stuff with like the she creature guy. We say that because he's wearing the she creature costume, but he has been like moving around through secret passageways, and the spinning fireplace, and he has a thing to make spooky sounds, but they don't indicate anywhere how the candles are floating and things like that. So that's the ghost that's doing that stuff.
Well, also let it be known that the hideout, it's found by our main, woman protagonist, but nobody believes her that there was a spinning fireplace. But it's actually found out by the AI car,
Oh, right.
a robot car, whatever you would want to call it at the
Yeah,
time.
it's like psychic, that car.
Yeah, and it knows because it's just that smart.
It's
And
seriously
eventually,
AI.
what we don't know is eventually that car is the basis of Skynet.
Yes.
Yeah, no, that's what I always say, Tony. I say that every time we watch anything with AI, and I'm like, and then Terminator happens. It's like,
it's in a basement
because
somewhere, and they
every
find
time. No, it drives me crazy. Because that's exactly right. Like, why does this car know all the things? I don't know. But anyway, it's super funny because it's just like, yeah, I'm gonna produce a tool suddenly out of nowhere to open this secret passage in the chimney, and it's like, wait, where'd that tool come from, and how do you know this? It's just so weird. It's so weird. I was
Yes.
freaking out that whole
because
time.
that couple's a genius couple, and they developed a.
Man, yeah. They should
AI
have their
car.
own stories.
I mean,
Drew
I guess if the
should
car
just
has
create
X-ray
these
vision,
characters again. They're in the public domain, Drew. You can rip these guys off completely. And
Well, I mean, or I can just take inspiration and
Yes, indeed.
rip it off, and
in other words,
Right.
or I could not.
yeah.
Yes.
Well,
It's true.
I
Lucy
mean,
Chaplin is way more
it's-
interesting than this.
It's
than
not.
This character,
Well, I
but-
mean, she's not entirely un Lucy-esque in her
Yeah.
glamorous braininess. So
Right.
Yeah.
There you go.
yeah.
That's for real. Yeah. She could be a what do you call the opposite of a descendant? An ancestor. She could be an
A
ancestor
relative.
of Lucy Chaplin. Yeah.
Yeah.
A great
Was her-
grandmother.
Well, that doesn't even have to
No,
be great
it's not.
grandmother. It could be
Yeah,
like
I
an
was gonna
aunt.
say
or
we're talking about
something.
1959.
Yeah, you're right. That's
Your
true.
poor mom's going, what?
Yeah.
Be like her parents' age.
No, that's true. It's a good point. Well, I mean, let's see. When was my mom born? My mom was born in 51, right? So she
You aren't supposed to tell that stuff online.
Oh, sorry.
What are you doing? Man. Come on, Jason. Even I know this.
So yeah, all right. So and that's the end. If you're Count Floyd, you finally come back after that scene and go, boy, was that something amazing. We finally had some spookiness. And yes.
Yeah, so the ghost walks out of the portrait and leaves, I guess.
Yeah.
He appears to just leave. He appears to be like, you know what, screw this. You guys are too loud. I
And
can't
that's
sleep.
the end.
Yeah.
Or as they call it, the endest man is what it says
Yeah.
on the screen.
So silly.
I am so happy that we watched this movie. I mean, honest to God, people are like, Jason, what did you do with your life? Because I'm closer to the end than I am to the beginning, right? Every day is precious. And I'm so glad. I'm not being sarcastic at all. I'm glad that
Jeez,
this is the
talking
movie.
like you're like 90 years old.
No, but I'm clearly closer to the end than I am to the beginning, right? And so I have to make
There's
my
people
choices.
who live longer than older than 100. So you
If
might
you
not be.
insist. Sure.
Yep.
Okay. I'm just saying that I would rather.
I'm
watch
going to
this
curse
movie
you with
than-
long life right now, Jason Henderson.
And his family,
You're
Drew, it
going
didn't
to
take that
live to
much.
be 150 years old.
It doesn't take that much. 'Cause
Yeah?
His family actually is has very long
That's
very
true.
long lives.
They live a
Or
long-
you might be
I
your
just-
consciousness may be transferred into an AI hot rod.
There you
Yeah,
go.
baby.
You never know.
Oh yeah. Oh my goodness.
Do you think that's what it is? You think that hot rod is actually
No.
somebody's
I think they
human?
I think it's fully
Fully AI?
again, eventually Skynet.
It's a
that's the
self-driving car early.
Isn't it crazy that they decided to do this? Like in the middle of this movie, it's like, I don't know, what do we do at this point? Well, how about if the guy comes out with an intelligent car?
But-
like,
You know what's interesting too, though?
Yeah.
is
I think that's
his
literally
car-
how they wrote it.
Yeah. The car wrote that would be interesting. That would be
Chat.
fascinating.
What is it? Chat GBT.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so this car, this hot rod actually existed and wrote this movie. That would be fascinating.
It's an autobiography.
that's
What I
that's
what
why
I
it
find
sometimes doesn't make sense. Yeah.
fascinating though is it goes back to what Drew's talking about. Like everybody has really slick cars, and the one guy just talks ad nauseum. In order he makes up a lot of lingo to kind of impress the interviewer guy.
Yeah.
But everybody else's cars are kind of really slick, and this AI car is definitely a first prototype built by a mad genius. So
Yes.
it is a jalopy. It's a broken down like junker.
Yeah.
That happens to be a super advanced broken down junker.
Oh my god! And
Even the
they have
painting-
this car inside a building, and
Yeah.
there are flames coming out the back, and I'm like,
Right.
that is so dangerous. Oh my god!
Oh, of course. Well, it knows it's smarter than everybody, so it knows exactly how
If
dangerous
it burns
is
the
or
house
not.
down, it'll be on
Yeah.
purpose, is what you're saying.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. It knows its limitations, evidently.
Right.
Although it's still trying not to be bested by a parrot. So
Yes.
it's at least as smart as a parrot.
The parrot
It's
is
called
its nemesis.
She.
Yeah.
It's gendered female. It has
right.
a deep male
Oh
voice.
yeah, you're right.
For
Yes.
reasons. for
But I thought it
reasons
was
unac-
fascinating that they didn't build it. If you want to go back to Grease, it's the actual Grease Lightning as opposed to the idealized Grease Lightning.
Yeah, excellent point.
Right.
And it's definitely goes back to what Drew was saying, where a lot of cars were built as junkers. So he's when he's putting this together, it's the best prototype you can get based off of scrap parts, which happens to
Yeah.
also be able to talk and everything else. So we know where he spent his time.
The
But I
car
thought that
will
was
build.
interesting.
The car will
Yeah.
build herself a better body eventually.
Right.
Good grief.
Like
Fantastic.
all AI gone wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Eventually that, this is the precursor to Megan
Yep.
as well.
Oh Lord.
So, all right. Let's get to our final thoughts on this film. By the way, just in case you're wondering, if you want to find this film, it's in the public domain. It's on YouTube. You can watch it. You can watch it right this instant. You can watch it in less time than we have spent discussing it so far. It's in glorious black and white, and yeah, I'm very happy that we watched this. So let's get our final thoughts. Oh, go ahead, Tony.
We used to be on other services too. I'm surprised that it left. I don't know what makes a public domain service leave public domain movie leave services.
Yeah, good.
But
good
I
question.
know I watched it because I have all
they have
kinds of.
they have limited server space, so they have to.
I guess so. I mean, that's probably it. But and there was also a purge of a couple. Like Amazon did a huge purge of just stuff that didn't fit was dicey or didn't fit its brand or numerous stuff. But I did remember because I have way too many Roku apps that just basically host stuff like this, and some of them are more spurious than others. And
I haven't gone
they leave my
searching
Roku from time to time because they get banned.
Mhm.
But I used to watch. I'll watch an infinite amount of movies like this, and I know it was on a service, but luckily YouTube has it, so that's the way to get it.
Yeah, and I'm sure that it's available also on probably a DVD. I haven't checked lately, but
I don't want to get a Blu-ray with the commentary. That would be fascinating.
Man, I would love a Blu-ray of this movie. I mean, honestly, what I'd like is a Blu-ray that put together like a little mini collection of like hot rod movies or horror.
Surely
1950s horror.
somebody has done that.
I'm certain. I have no doubt. I miss the days when you could go to Best Buy and get for like $13 these collections that would have just a bejesus amount of public domain horror movies that were.
How much is that bejesus amount? I've not heard that particular quantity.
It's about a ghoul. I don't know.
Okay.
Oh man, speculators have made it sucky. But the DVD for $115, which has the Ghost in the Invisible Bikini, which I think I've seen that too. Because I'll watch an infinite.
Oh, we've seen Ghost. We did an episode of Ghost in the Invisible Bikini,
but like
maybe you weren't on that episode.
Now they want $115 for it, so that's sad. But I would dig a Blu-ray with some cool historical commentary. I think that'd be great.
I just want to say that's appalling. The Ghost in the Invisible Bikini is not a good film. That's literally like one of the worst of the AIP surf party movies.
It's got Basil Rathbone in it though, so that's
it does, and it's got Boris Karloff, so and Harvey Lembeck. It's missing Frankie and Annette, but whatever. Anyway, but okay, back to Ghost of Dragstrip Hollow. Julia, and you're free to mention anything that we may have forgotten to touch on, but what are your final thoughts on the Ghost of Dragstrip Hollow?
I mean, I think it's probably a very low budget film. I didn't look how much they spent, but they managed to fit in some good stuff. Given that, like they fit in some, they do manage to fit in a couple of car scenes. The one that's clearly actually driving around in that whatever that concrete thing is, and then the one with the old lady. They managed to fit in a couple of different sets, and so they did some creative stuff with them. So good for them on that. And then there are some funny lines. There's some fun characters. It would have been good to have more of the plot in the plot with the plot with the monster / ghost and ghost. I would have liked to actually see a lot more of the actual ghost. You know what I mean? Like just to find out what his deal was and why he's haunting. That would have been really fun. So I think there would have been room for improvement in that regard. Yep. But it was a kick and it was weird. Such a weird movie. I love a weird movie. I really enjoy weird movies. So that was a good thing.
Well, I'm really glad you're here because I enjoy weird movies too. So that's great. Awesome.
Almost like the two of you are married.
I know.
It's meant to be.
I know. Tony, what about you?
Yeah, I like this movie. Yes, it is kind of, some people go, "Hey, that's barely a horror movie. What are you people doing?" In which case I just go, because we like fun. And
Yes.
this has a lot of stuff. I mean, we've been discussing it longer than the movie actually is, which is of
Yes.
course no mean feat, but we this is something we do all the time.
Yeah.
But I think it's got a lot of interesting bits. I think it's an interesting. I love kind of cultural time capsules like this. It's not the most popular movie, so you get to see kind of a different side of people making a movie, having fun with it. And it does, have classic monster movie costumes in it. It does have a ghost. And by the way, dude, I think the ghost is the older woman's husband, right? Like she says, "Oh, why are you doing this?"
Is it the husband? I can't remember.
I think it was. Yeah, I'm pretty sure because she mentions
Okay.
it. Yeah. And I think it's the characters are interesting. I like that it's pro the kids in it in the same way that Gila Monster and a few others are, but it's not, since it's comedic, it's kind of more so that I think the parents, Julia was right in that usually you get the extra line of "that's I know," but I think throughout it there's a lot of snide kind of, yeah, look, every generation has this. Come on. Get with it kind of attitude. And I just, I think there's a lot of great gags, and I do think that there were other filmmakers watching this stuff that kind of got ideas from it. I think there's again, it's going back to my idea of watch the stuff that the people you idolize watch, and you'll kind of see some bits that you can kind of add to your palette. I just
good point.
think that comes up time and time again in my head, and I really enjoyed it. I'll probably watch Missile to the Moon again as well soon.
Excellent. Yeah, that's the other place where you can find Sunita Pelkey. Yeah. Drew, what about you?
So I do wish there was a version of this movie that was about 20 to 30 minutes longer, in which we did get a final confrontation with the rival gang, and that we perhaps had a little bit more of the haunted house stuff, since the movie is sold on that. But I think that this is a fun movie as it is, and again, harmless fluff, if nothing else. Like if you want like your 50s B movie fix, like this definitely is going to do that for you. So at less than feature, basically this is the same length as a modern episode of television, because like most TV shows are an hour long right now. So you have the attention span to watch this. And if like you like hot rod cars, if you like, cool chicks in tight pants and working on cars and rock and roll and the occasional bouts of spookiness, like you have the attention span to watch this. It's a good time.
Wonderful, thank you. Yes, I agree completely. I'm so happy we watched this. I want to live in this world. I as always, my fetishes are always about whether it's the 80s or the 90s or the 70s, or in this case the 50s. I want it to have lots of markers of that time, and like a real feel like you're in another world and all the details are here. I love watching all of those markers. I like the snow globe that this is, of being able to walk around in the 50s. So this is sweet, and it would be cool actually to watch this with Grease, and compare and contrast what the late 70s thought about 1959 versus what the producers of drive-in films in 59 thought about 59.
Well, and if I may just jump in here with one of my endorsements and say that we've actually been watching the new show Grease Pink Ladies.
Yes.
And that show gives us a different perspective on this era than either of these other things, because it says, oh, it's cute that that Grease shows Rydell as if it's only white people, but actually there were some other people that weren't just white people there. And let's just give this the Pink Ladies an origin story where it's actually women of color and other like different I don't know actually if the character of Cynthia is but well, Cynthia's definitely queer.
All kind
I
of different.
don't know what
you could say
what
different
else,
gender
what else.
expressions, basically.
But yeah. But the point is, there's like this very diverse kind of group, and it's like, and it's not saying, oh, we're being we're doing colorblind casting. It's saying, hey, these people existed in these worlds, and just because the main popular kids didn't see them didn't mean they didn't exist. Which I think is a really interesting take on the whole thing.
That's
You know,
true.
it's like what happens to people of color in a well-to-do, basically middle class neighborhood, like that. We're not talking about let's just focus it on the inner city or anything like that. It's like, no, this is the suburbs or whatever Rydell is, but there's also some people of color there. So I think that's been a really interesting way to look at it, and it's well done. It's at least far as I think, as far as the singing and dancing and all the characters, I'm having a good time with it. So I don't know if you wanted to throw to endorsements yet, but I did want to throw that one in.
Sure. Well,
Right
actually,
then,
and you
because it
would be
makes
first
sense.
anyway. So is
Yeah.
that your only endorsement, or did you have?
No, let me see. I said it last week, said it probably the week before that. If you are a Star Trek Next Generation fan, oh my gosh, Picard is just so much fun. This last episode was so much fun. It was just the best. Like, somebody complained that it was fan service, but it's like, I'm like, this fan is being served well by this by this particular series. I'm trying to remember what movie we saw. What movie we see in the theater? We saw something. No, I can't remember what it was.
Well, we saw Usurpadora.
Oh yeah, well, we talked about that last time, so yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay, yeah, that's it for now.
All right. Very cool. Tony, what do you got for us?
I have a couple things, but I haven't watched as many movies lately. Just stuff that's around. Still watching the Wu-Tang biopic series, which is great. But my endorsements are a couple of things. Golden Ninja Video, by the way, is a video distributor kind of, and I like it. They said online, like, hey, we want to keep doing this. So I'm going to give a shout out to Gold Ninja for being kind of an unsung, really independent distributor. And they're doing things like they did some Taiwanese films, Thrilling Bloody Sword. I'm sad because they have such short runs that I missed a lot of their martial arts flicks, and I wish that they would reprint them. So, but they have, like, their newest thing is a Blu-ray of King of the Bullwhip, which is a later, like, Lash LaRue, it's a Lash LaRue film. I forgot what year it was though. And so but they have, what's interesting is maybe the prints sometimes, like for Thrilling Bloody Sword, for example, the prints have scratches and stuff like that. It's like the best they can get for this distributor, but they put a lot of work into the extras, and it takes a while because it's so independently done. But I think it's just cool that we live in an era where there are places like Gold Ninja Video. They have a 16 millimeter White Zombie Blu-ray, and the idea being this is what you would look at like a faded 16 millimeter, like a library copy, which has all these other extras, which is fascinating, including like Bela Lugosi and Phantom Ship from a scan from a 16 millimeter print. So they're doing all and strange independent films, or I say strange, but just stuff they can get. And I just thought it's really cool. And when they ask for kind of shout outs to keep doing stuff, because it's hard when you're small to kind of make it out there. But I came across them and was just like, oh man, I'm only sad because I missed out on a bunch of stuff that they were releasing, which is really, really fun and cool. So Gold Ninja Video is definitely one of my big endorsements. I'm also going to endorse I put some stuff up this past week. If you check out the Facebook page, there's a martial arts film festival that's happening. That's super cool. The Venture Brothers box set I put up is also, I'm just super excited because I love Venture Brothers. But also, there's still time to buy tickets to Chattanooga Film Festival, which is still doing virtual, and it's getting harder and harder to do virtual film festivals. I found out through the grapevine that when studios had to do releases during lockdown, that they want to get movies out, especially indie movies, and now that's kind of tapered off. It's harder because you want to show your stuff theatrically, right? The theater experience is still very much, and I love the theater experience, don't get me wrong, but it's the fact that Chattanooga is still doing a virtual version of their fest in some shape, form, and fashion. That's amazing. And I think it allows people, one thing I love about it is it allows more people to go to a film festival. You don't have to fly there necessarily, there, if you can't, you have a lot of people have spoken up and said, "Hey, I have disabilities. I often can't go to a film festival, but I can go to virtual festivals, and that's really cool." And so the fact that Chattanooga has kept that is pretty neat, and it was definitely my style for the past couple years. It's just cool to, some of their stuff is time release, and some of it is, you can watch it all week. But I really feel strongly that I really, that they're doing the right thing and they're doing cool stuff, and they deserve a lot of credit for really running with it. They were one of the first ones I saw during lockdown that did it, and it was great. It was a fun time. So the fact that they're keeping that and making and embracing it in a time when it's harder and harder to do that is really cool, in my opinion. So and it's just such a nice, leveler for people who may not can go to other film festivals. So
wonderful.
And also, like I said, the martial arts film festival that I posted on our Facebook page also has a virtual component. So I'm hoping that I can cover some of those as well. We'll see. But either way, you can get tickets to that too. I'm super enthusiastic. I mean, it's no it's not a surprise that I'm going to support a martial arts film festival, right? Anybody who's listening at any point in time.
Yeah.
But the fact that you can get a virtual ticket to it is pretty awesome.
Wonderful. Thank you. Drew, what about you?
Well, I watched 2 movies, neither of which were recent. There's actually a lot out in theaters right now that I would like to go see, but unfortunately I have not been able to do that. I was homebound for a couple of days, so I ended up watching a lot of movies at home. One movie on Amazon Prime that I really enjoyed, that was a movie that I know I saw when I was a kid, but I had sort of blended it in with Boggy Creek. And
Yeah.
I for years have been wondering if I had imagined the scenes that I now realize were in this movie. It's a movie called Creature from the Black Lake, and it
Okay.
is a late 1970s Bigfoot movie that follows 2 graduate students as they investigate Bigfoot sightings in rural Louisiana.
Huh.
And it's very watchable. The 2 leads have like a good buddy chemistry with it, and also what I liked about it is it has empathy for the small town characters. Like, they could have just made them out to be dumb hicks. And I mean, I'm not saying there isn't some stereotyping going on, but they're a little bit more multidimensional than I think other sort of like hicksploitation movies really go into. So I if you're a fan of cryptid based monster movies, I think totally worth checking out. Another movie which I found on Tubi, and I actually talked about this on our big group chat that we have with Monster Movie Happy Hour, which was it's called The Ghoul, and it's what is best described as a Hammer knockoff. It's even directed by Freddie Francis. It's got Peter Cushing in it.
Is it
It's
in
got
color?
John Hurt sporting some it's in color. It's got John Hurt with some very Ramones-esque hair. If you like Hammer horror, I think you will definitely get a kick out of it. And there's some stuff in it that's actually even today as a movie that came out, nearly 50 years ago, I'm assuming, holds up as kind of shocking and scary. So good flick, and that one was on Tubi. So those are my 2 endorsements. And of course, go nominate me for the Ringo Awards. I'm gonna keep that short and sweet this week, because I know we've probably spent more time talking about the movie than we even probably should have.
Okay, and by the way, I've nominated you for the Ringo, so and I encourage other people to do that.
Thank you.
Let's see. If Joya, if you're sure that we already endorsed La Usurpadora the musical, did we? Because we didn't
We
have
couldn't
a show
have, because
last weekend.
we didn't see it. Yeah, you're right. We didn't see it. So you can do it.
Yes. So, all right. So I saw the trailer for La Usurpadora, and I apologize, my Spanish is not that good. But the Usurper, the musical, it is a Spanish language jukebox musical with subtitles about this rich, evilish woman and her long lost pure of heart, poor twin who switch places, and it's a musical romantic comedy, and it is to die for. It is so good. We
Basically, the
just
Princess and the Pauper kind of thing.
yeah, and it was fantastic, and I loved it so much that I've become hyper fixated on it, and now I have been watching the 1998 telenovela that this musical is based on, and so that's been a blast, especially because Julia is just
Practicing
so
Spanish.
appalled that I'm
No,
basically
I'm
watching.
after
an-
you spent a good solid 2 years watching all the episodes of Peyton Place. I cannot say I'm appalled. I'm glad that you're learning Spanish better.
Thank you.
I mean, you've always been really good at it, so it's always great to improve.
This has
Improve your
been super
skills.
fun because again you've got subtitles on the telenovela, so it's much easier for me to understand the Spanish if I'm reading it than just hearing it. So it's been really cool, and so that's a blast. So La Usurpadora, you definitely got to see this in the movie theater if you can. In some parts of the country, it's being released on the 17th. So I don't know how that could be, but that's the listed release date, which is like tomorrow. So I don't know what that means. But regardless,
I
we
guess we
saw
saw
it.
an early
We saw it
release.
on the 7th. So whatever. Anyway,
I
definitely check it out.
I don't
Yeah.
think you need to apologize though. We all know if you've been listening, if you have been listening to us throughout, we know that you like your stories.
Yes.
Your stories.
Like
I
you're a
remember that's
fan
You
of
what
like your
stories.
stories.
I remember that's what Jason's great grandmother used to call it.
No, that's
Your
Yes.
stories.
yeah,
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
right.
always the old lady term.
Yeah.
We
Yeah,
know you
I
like your stories. I mean, you've endorsed General Hospital
yeah,
more than
I've been pretty consistent
We're
that I like
not.
soap operas. It's true.
It's
Um,
no secret.
it's
Which
right.
I used to watch that stuff because my grandfather had a TV repair shop, and
Oh,
he
yeah.
would
No,
test
I
he would
watched.
test all the TVs. So probably there were like 3 or 4 soap operas going on at any given time because as he was repairing them, I watched, so I knew what was going on every summer
That's so
in
great.
in soap opera land.
In the 80s, I watched Days of Our Lives. Didn't really very much. I started watching it again during my lunch hour when I was working like in the late 90s and early 2000s, I guess. And then I didn't watch it anymore. Jason, for some reason, started watching Days of Our Lives in the last few months. And
Well,
it's all the
Nice.
same people and it's all
Yeah.
the same plots still.
Right.
Like same actors
There
even.
was the
Crazy.
2 I remember where there was a time when there was like a James Bond thing happening.
Oh, that's still
On Gen-
happening. Yeah, yeah,
on
yeah.
general, but there
All
was
the James Bond
literally an
characters.
island. Like there
Yes.
was a James Bond thing one summer, which I thought was, and there was a supernatural one that
Yep.
had like a box.
Well,
with
in
a-
ours,
with
in
a-
Days of Our Lives, Marlena had been possessed by Satan or whatever.
Oh,
Anyway, and it
nice.
was like super, super supernatural. But now apparently there's stuff like that. It's just so funny that he's like watching it, and I'm like, oh my
Yeah,
god,
Well, the
that's
thing of
really
it
the same people.
is, Days has moved to Peacock, and so a lot of people who kind of stopped watching it over the last like 15 or 20 years, a lot of people kept watching it on broadcast. A lot of people quit, but now that it's at Peacock, it's finding an audience again from people who are like, "Oh, how interesting! I can have a show that has a fresh episode every day,
It's so funny.
and it's on Peacock." So there
Yeah,
you go.
but there was some supernatural one where this guy opened some box and it had some like mist that they
So
caused
they
him
did
to
their
be
phantasm thing, basically.
undead, and he just kind of sat there. Again, I only saw these things during the summer, so whatever was
Yeah.
happening after the summer, after I left my grandparents, I have
Mhm.
no idea. But there was a 80s. The whole thing was, I guess it was supposed to be, hey, if you like Dark Shadows, we're bringing this kind of stuff back. But I don't know whatever happened to it. But that was a weird one where I was like,
That's awesome.
but it
That's
still felt like a
interesting.
soap opera. So I was
All
Well,
right,
there
well, we-
was Passions, and Passions had a lot of supernatural elements, but I didn't watch that show.
We have somehow
Maybe.
managed to talk about this longer than the movie actually was.
Yeah.
Once
Yes,
again.
I'm
Once
sorry.
again.
Once again, La Usurpadora, you definitely owe it to yourself to go watch this movie. It is
Right.
a feel-good musical, and I loved it. So, okay, everybody, be excellent to one another. Thank you so much for joining us for this discussion of the Ghost of Dragstrip Hollow, and we'll be back soon. Pretty soon, we're going to be starting our multi-part Scream series, but I don't know if that's next week or if we got something in between. I don't know. But pretty soon it's going to be Scream and then Scream and Scream and Scream. That's going to be what we're doing for a while. So it'll be cool.
Scream
All right,
until you
everybody.
like it.
I'll talk
Good
to you
week.
soon. Bye.
The endist, man.
The end.
The end is
Bye.
later.